A note to listeners. The following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences.
And we went to Kentucky, her and I stole a truck from one of her prior boyfriends, drove to Kentucky, killed a man for $10,000, the first time I ever killed anybody. And she said, "Who do you think they're going to believe if we get caught?" And I told her, "Don't say that, or I'll kill you too." I just want to right a wrong that I made, a terrible wrong. She's the biggest victim in this whole thing. She was a Me Too victim before Me Too was even a thing. She's probably the biggest Me Too victim in the world. And it got to a point where I started cutting on myself. I felt so bad. I would cut my arm open and down the ring to my arm with a razor blade. I would hang myself. They would rush in and get me and rush me to the hospital.
I mean, if you could say anything to that victim who's just an innocent person, what would you say to that person?
I would say, if you could torture me 1,000 times a day for 1,000 years, I would never be able to make up what I took from you. I'm very sorry.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman. Hi, everyone. If you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, even if it's one word.
And please subscribe to our website, www.partnersintruecrime. Follow us on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram to check out our weekly promos. We're also now on YouTube at Partners in True Crime. If you subscribe to our website, you'll be getting weekly emails from us and all kinds of promotions and things that we don't advertise on the podcast. We just wanted to thank those of you who sent a review to us. We really, really appreciate it. So we want to thank Slammy, who gave us a review on Monday. And we want to thank Haley Payne, who gave us a review last week. And we also want to thank STI458. You guys are great. We really appreciate our listeners. We really, really appreciate it. This week, we're reporting live outside of San Quentin State Prison in California.
This is history in the making. We are witnessing the dismantling of the country's largest death row population. This month, San Quentin is moving death row offenders into general population at prisons around the state.
Death row offenders are some of the world's most sadistic killers who have been condemned to death for their brutal murders of innocent victims. But even so, there have not been any executions in California since 2006. And in 2019, Governor Newsom closed the death chamber at San Quentin. San Quentin is now called a rehabilitation center, as an example of Governor Newsom's plan to change the prison systems in the United States.
This is a very controversial topic. Victim advocates are upset that killers will not be getting the death penalty or serving their full sentences, and supporters of the plan argue that it will prioritize rehabilitation by creating a new model for safety and justice.
This week, there's been a lot of discussion about Patrick Goodman, a 49-year-old man who killed 3-year-old Elijah Sanderson in 2000. It's a terribly sad story. The little boy was beaten so badly that his body was unrecognizable.
In December 2023, Goodman was granted parole from the California Health Care Facility in Stockton after serving 21 years of his 25 to life sentence.
Goodman claims that he is a changed man, and he wants to repent for his sin. But it's a hard question, and it's one that we should consider. Is rehabilitation possible when people commit sadistic murders?
Today we're going to be speaking to Jim Marlowe, the Wolf of Folsom. Jim has been on death row since August 30th, 1989. Jim claims that he has been working with therapists towards his rehabilitation. Jim did not murder his victims alone. His co-defendant, Cynthia Kaufman, is serving a life sentence at Central California Women's Facility.
In 1986, James Marlowe and Cynthia Kaufman were on a cross-country killing spree when they were arrested on November 14th for the murder of Linnell Murray.
On November 12, 1986, 19-year-old Linnell Murray was finishing up at a dry cleaner where she worked part-time. Witnesses saw her disappear into the alley with a dark-haired woman, and the next day her body was found at a local motel in Huntington Beach, California.
2 days later, Marlowe used Linnell's credit card at a motel, tipping off police, and it sparked one of the biggest manhunts in Big Bear history. Cynthia and James surrendered to police and were arrested. They admitted that in addition to killing Linnell, there were 4 other victims.
The first murder was on July 7, 1986, in Whitey, Kentucky. Marijuana dealer Greg Hill was found dead just yards from his house with a single gunshot wound to his head.
Just a few months later, on October 11th, 1986, 32-year-old Sandra Neary left her husband and baby while she ran to get cash in an ATM near her home in Costa Mesa, California. But Sandra never made it home. Hikers found her body 2 weeks later. She had been strangled to death.
A few weeks later, on October 28th, 1986, 35-year-old Paula Simmons was withdrawing money from an ATM in Bullhead City, Arizona, when she vanished. Tourists found Simmons' body near a radio station.
On November 7th, 1986, 20-year-old Corinna Novus drove to the Redlands Mall at 7 p.m. to go shopping before heading to a college party. Just as she was about to get out of her car, Cynthia approached her and asked her to give them a ride. Corinna agreed, and she never made it to the party. Her body was found in a shallow grave near a vineyard 40 miles away.
On August 30th, 1989, Cynthia Kaufman and James Marlowe were sentenced to death.
Today, Jim wants to confess something before he is moved off death row into general population.
Let's hear what he has to say. All right, well, listen, thanks for coming on the podcast. I know Laura's told you a little bit about what we do. We're happy to have you on to talk to us about. Why don't you start off by just introducing yourself and tell us who you are.
My name is James Gregory Marlowe. I'm a convicted murderer in San Quentin's death row. Been in prison since 1986. I have a female co-defendant named Cynthia Lynn Kaufman, who's also on death row.
Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit about your background, like where you're from originally, where you grew up, and what are the things about your life that led you to a life of crime?
Okay, I left Kentucky in the second grade with my mom, and a bunch of our family came out to California. We bounced around a lot. And then later on, when I was about 12 or 13, my mom went to prison for heroin. And she used to shoot me up with heroin when I was 13 until I was about 17. And she would go to prison periodically for heroin or burglary or under the influence. And I would go to foster homes and be real mad at her for not being there for me. And I would go visit her in prison. That was an experience. Later on, going to a lot of foster homes, and when she would get out, I would hook back up with her, and we would go do robberies and burglaries and get heroin and shoot it up. And this went on for years until I was about 17. She had a walk away from a California women's facility in Southern California, and she burned up in a trailer in Ohio under a different name. She was working in a plastics factory. She didn't need the money to fly out there to be with her. I was with my first wife since I was 15, and I married her when I was 17. Linda Sepulveda, she was 23, and she had 2 prior kids. I used to watch them as she went to work. Later on, fast forward, I went back and forth to Kentucky to California a few times, got a job in a coal mine, didn't like that, came back to California, got arrested for heroin, burglary, went to California CRC, California Rehabilitation Center for heroin as a youth offender. I got out of there. I kept doing drugs and hitchhiking all over the place. My mom had died. I felt abandoned. And I went to jail again in 1979 for armed robbery, me and my co-defendant. And I pled guilty for 5 years in prison. They sent me to Tracy Dual Vocational Institution, which I got in trouble there, and they sent me to Folsom. And that was quite an experience. Everybody was killing everybody all the time. I got out in 1982. I married a woman while I was incarcerated named Kathy Blaisdell. She owned a horse ranch in Barstow Desert called Pick a Spot, Appaloosa. I married her, got out, did a year clean on parole, pissing in a bottle twice a month to see if I was using heroin. So I got off a discharge early, a year off parole, no dirty test. I kept having big arguments with my wife. I kept lifting weights and stuff when I was out. And she was so jealous of me going anywhere or doing anything, wondering who I was being with, because her first husband was unfaithful to her, so she had that insecurity, and I just felt like I was paying for something I hadn't even done. So her and I got a divorce, and I took her limousine, joyriding in it, and she had me arrested for stealing her car. They put me in the Barstow City Jail, where I first encountered Cynthia Lynn Kaufman, I could hear her cussing out the police on the women's side. I asked the guy I was in jail with, "Who's that?" It was Douglas Huntley, her boyfriend. He said, "Oh, we got arrested jumping on some guys and having a gun." So he and I were smoking marijuana in the jail, and I was listening to her cuss out the cops, and he told me where they lived. So when we got out, I went over there to meet him, and I instantly fell in love with Cynthia. She was beautiful. Anyway, they wanted me to help them get a job. I was working with the microwave telephone tower installations, and I came up to Placerville to put in a microwave tower. And I went back to Barstow a few weeks later, and I went over to their apartment, and Cynthia was packing up the station wagon, saying the landlord was kicking her out. She had nowhere to go. That her boyfriend was in San Bernardino County Jail for 90 days for non-child support on his previous marriage. So I told her I'd give her a place to stay. So I took her in her station wagon. And I drove out to the desert to Steve Schmidt's house, a friend of mine in Newberry Springs. And Cynthia and I stayed in an abandoned trailer. Right away, I took her address book and kept her away from any of her contacts, isolated her. And I used to choke her out and torture her all the time, beat her, left her in the desert a few days, hog-tied, naked, would bite her nose. I would put my mouth over her nose and bite it until it broke her skin. She would scream, "Please don't bite off my nose." I told her, "If you do anything I tell you not to do, I'm going to bite your nose off and swallow it. And you'll look so ugly, no one will want you, but I'll still want you." So that went on and on and on and on and on, escalated and escalated until she was finally just like a robot. And we went to Kentucky. Her and I stole a truck from one of her prior boyfriends, drove to Kentucky, killed a man for $10,000. The first time I ever killed anybody. And she said, "Who do you think they're going to believe if we get caught?" And I told her, "Don't say that, or I'll kill you too." So we ran around spending the money, bought a Harley Davidson, drove around, traded that for a blue Cadillac and some money, drove back to California. She wanted me to kidnap her son from St. Louis, Missouri, from her in-laws who proved her an unfit mother and got him taken away from her because of meth. She wanted to get her son back and run off and live happily ever after. So we came to California, sold the car, did a bunch of meth, had sex all the time, ran out of money, started looking around for a way to get to Missouri and kidnap her son for her. That's when the two murders happened against Karina Novus and Linnell Murray. We stole the car, got money from their bank account, and we're going to drive back to Missouri. But we kept doing so much meth, we ended up in Big Bear, California, and they were looking for us everywhere because we were trying to use a dead person's credit card, which I know better than to do that, but at the time my state of mind was really gone. So they came after us. We're trying to use that credit card, and we ran through the woods and escaped them, the helicopters and everything, until finally they caught us on the road in our swimming suits with boots on in 30-degree weather. And we came to jail. They kept asking me where the body was of Karina Novus, and I told them I don't know. And I said, "Cynthia probably knows." So they asked her. They took her. I showed them the field where she was at. And they went to Cynthia and said, "He's already told us it was this area. If you don't show us where it is, we're going to let him show us, and he's going to get the deal, and you won't." So she took him to a body, and they burned her for it.
What do you mean by they burned her for it?
I mean, they didn't give her no deal.
Oh.
And later on in trial, I went against her in trial because in court holding, they would let her out of her cell in a little walkaway area in the high-power unit. And it would be like 3 guys back there, me and 2 other guys and her. And she would get out on the tier and have sex with guys through the bars. And it used to make me really jealous. So I turned against her in trial because she was trying to have prison gang members and officers kill me, saying that I was going to testify against her. And they were trying to stop me before I could do it. I went to trial. I testified against her. I made her look like a demented mastermind. I pretended to be a dumb hillbilly hick on the stand and blamed it all on her. I told them that they said that the body of Karina Novus was found face down in a shallow grave. I told them, no, I left her face up. I left sand around her head, but where she could breathe, I left her face up. Cynthia must have went back later and killed her and left her face down. Jury believed me.
So you made that all up?
Did I kill?
You made up the whole grave thing?
Yeah. Really was a dead person. And there really was a dead person in there. I killed 3 people, a man in Kentucky and 2 women in Southern California, 2 golden girls. Okay, on the first murder of Karina Novus, Cindy sat in the car in the vineyard, and I went about 50 feet away, and I strangled Miss Novus to death with a tie in my arm, and I buried her in a shallow grave. And I told Cynthia how I killed her and told her if she ever crossed me, I'd do the same to her. We left there with her car and went to Huntington Beach, and where we found Linnell Murray in a dry cleaning business. We went into the dry cleaning business and pulled a gun on her and handcuffed her and took her to a hotel, where I sent Cynthia to buy food and drink. And while she was gone, I raped Miss Murray. And Cynthia came back, and I got in a big fight with her and slapped her around and threw her around the room. Later on, we cut off strips of towels and wrapped them around Miss Murray's hands and feet, tied her to the bed. She started to scream as I pushed her face in the pillow. And I tore off a towel and put it around her neck and told Cynthia to pull on one end and I would pull on the other. Cynthia wouldn't do it. So I pulled out my knife and I told her I was going to stab her again in the leg like I did before. I stabbed her before and her leg got really infected. And I nursed her back to health, telling her that I loved her. And I kept squeezing that hurt leg whenever she would do something I didn't want her to. And she would cry out. So she started pulling on the other side, and I pulled on the other side until we strangled Miss Murray to death. And then we took her and put her face down in a tub full of water, and I urinated in the water. Cynthia and I left and went to a hotel, stayed the night on the credit card of Miss Murray. That night we went out to dinner and had a big feast and celebrated. Cynthia was just like a robot. But after we got arrested, and she started writing guys in the jail trying to get help from me testifying against her. And the cops and the prisoners worked together to try to get at me. They would let me out in the high-power unit to use the phone or to take a shower. They're supposed to let you out one at a time. But they left extra doors open for prisoners to get at me. And every time they tried to get at me, I always got the upper hand, got their knives away, and turned them into the cops and let the guys live. I let them go. And I met a ex-Navy SEAL named Benson as a San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputy working in the jail. He said, I don't know how you got in this kind, but I'm a good judge of people. I'm going to look out for you while I'm here. So while he was there, the officers didn't pull any shenanigans on leaving doors open. But when he was gone, they would do that. And I would get alone with an officer and pull out a knife and scare him to half to death and tell him to stay out of the middle of this stuff. Leave me alone. I come in peace. Mr. Benson used to bring me books of, like the Great Planet Earth and other books about God and had me read them. So I started learning about God. And they always opened doors and try to set me up in different areas to be attacked by prisoners. But I always got the upper hand. I was in better shape than any of them. And I always turned in their knives, and they just left me alone. And I testified against Miss Kaufman and told them that she wanted to kill her in-laws and have me kidnap her son. But she didn't really want to kill him, but I told them that to make her look like an evil woman. I told them that I killed these women.
James, I was going to ask you, why are you telling us this now about Cynthia?
What do you mean? Why am I telling you?
Why are you giving us? Have you ever given this information to anybody else before, that she was basically a hostage and that you were basically?
I wrote to her lawyers and told them. I wrote to her lawyers 20 years ago and told them.
Why do you think they didn't believe you?
They said they were going to use my letter as Exhibit A, but I don't think they, like my lawyers, they don't really care if Cynthia's innocent or not. They'll leave us in here and drag it on until we die of old age. A burden on my heart.
Go ahead. You have a burden on your heart?
A burden on my heart to free this woman. She didn't want to kill anybody. She didn't kill anybody. She's been in prison for 37 years. I took away her youth, her beauty, her life, and it's just the closer I get to God, the more burden it is on my heart to try to right the wrong I did. I promised God I would never kill another human being, and I have been tested on that so many times. In San Quentin, I've had so many chances to kill officers and prisoners, and I always let them go. on the exercise yards and in the building. When I got up here, they were having all kinds of politics because I testified against my co-defendant. Yeah, that's a no-no in California. You don't go against a woman. But I did, and right away the staff and the prisoners would try to set me up on the yards or in the building, and I would swallow a bunch of metal pieces, like toenail clippers, fingernail clippers, wall brackets holding pipes, and they would send me out to the hospital and give me a laxative and make me have the runs where I would poop out the metal, and they would check the plastic bags and see if they could find it before they brought me back. And I did it so many times, they said, we're not taking you to the hospital anymore. Don't care how much metal you swallow. We're not doing it anymore. So I started to go out to the yard, and they said, don't even metal detect him. He's got metal in him, and it'll go off anyway. So I went to the yard without being metal detected, and I tore off a piece of fence, chain link, little wire that goes around the chain link fence. And I brought it back in through the metal. They didn't metal detect me. I brought it back in and sharpened it into a 9-inch ice pick like knife. And I would tell the officer going down the tier at count time that my light was out. A light bulb in the center of my ceiling. It would push their face up against the screen and say, Marlo, is your light really out? And I would shove that ice pick shank right by their face through the screen and say, I gotcha. And they would scream and holler, don't ever do that. Don't ever fucking do that, Marlo. And they would get a bunch of COs and come after me and beat me up. And I did it about 5 or 6 different times. One time I went out to the yard and I found a nail. And I wondered how I got there, but I took it back in the unit and I pushed it in the face through the screen by the face of Lieutenant, I can't remember the lieutenant's name. I pushed it in front of his, he grabbed it and said, what do you want? I told him, I just want you to stay out of the middle of all this. Quit helping my enemies.
So here, let me stop you for a second. So I just want to go back to something you said earlier. You used to swallow metal so they would take you to the hospital, and you did it so many times that they just stopped taking you to hospital. And was that some sort of technique so you were able to smuggle metal in and out of the yard? Is that what you did it for?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
How did you get that idea?
I just thought of it. I don't know how I got the idea. It just came to me.
I was going to say, and the reason you wanted that to fashion that weapon to kind of show the correctional officers that you can get to them?
Yes, despite their security or their technology or anything, I showed them that I could still get to them if I really wanted to. And they ended up putting me in a 5-point leather restraints in the old hospital. They'd leave you on a bed, broad-legged and stretched out into leather straps, spread eagle. And they'd leave a medical technician outside your cell with the door open, and around the corner down the hallway were 2 officers. And the guy fell asleep one night, so I reached my hand underneath the bed and tore off a piece of bed spring and straightened it on the side of the bed and sharpened it. And I cut the straps with that bed spring, and I pushed it back in the mattress so it looked like I was still tied down. And late at night when they were all sleeping, I jumped out of my cell and screamed, I got you! And they woke up and ran after me. I gave them my knife. They chained me back up with handcuffs instead of leather straps, smacked me around, said, don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. He could have done this. He could have done that. I know, but he didn't. But don't ever do that. It was like a little game for me.
That's what it sounds like.
I was just showing them that I could.
Yeah.
It was. I didn't really want to hurt any of them. I didn't want to hurt any of them, but I wanted them to leave me alone.
Yeah. Hey, Laura.
Finally,
Hey, Laura. What did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah. You know, when Marlo came to me telling me about Cynthia, your attorneys got wind of this, right, Marlo? That you were telling me about Cynthia?
Yeah, right. They're totally against it. They don't care about Cynthia being innocent. I tried to approach them. I tried to talk to them. They don't care.
Have you? Obviously, I'm sure you've tried to. I'm sure you've tried to reach out to Cynthia yourself, correct?
No.
No. So does she have any idea that you're?
No,
does she have any idea that you're talking on her behalf to say that she's innocent?
Yes,
I
because I have reached out to her, or tried to.
Okay.
To talk to her, yeah.
You got to the point where...
Well, I was going to go into, you talked about God. What led you to want to come forward about telling the truth about Cynthia and how, she was pretty much a hostage of yours?
I just want to right a wrong that I made, a terrible wrong. She's the biggest victim in this whole thing. She was a Me Too victim before Me Too was even a thing. She's probably the biggest Me Too victim in the world. And it got to a point where I started cutting on myself. I felt so bad. I would cut my arm open or down the length of my arm with a razor blade. I would hang myself. They would rush in and get me and rush me to the hospital. And finally, they put me on 20 years worth of psychotropic injected drugs, a forced injection. I took 20 years of that. I lived up in the hospital for about 8 years of group therapy and psychotherapy. I went, after 8 years of forced medication and psychotherapy, I went to 1 year of electric shock therapy to the outside hospital. And with all the therapy and all the treatments, I'm just a different person. I feel bad about the things I've done. I like to try to make it right if I could. I could never make it right, but at least I could try to do something. 37 years is a long time to be in prison, especially when you haven't really killed anybody.
Wait, what?
You mean you haven't killed anybody while you're in prison?
No, he means Cynthia.
Oh, Cynthia. Okay.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
What
yeah.
about your victims?
I can't remember everything in one setting that I did to Cynthia or in my life. It takes me a lot to remember stuff. I put a tattoo all down the length of her leg saying the property of Folsom Wolf in big horrible letters in ink with a needle.
That's Cynthia, correct?
And I shaved her head, right, and I shaved her head bald and wore her hair on my belt loop.
Can you tell us a little bit about the victims that you killed and why you chose those women?
Okay, Cynthia and I were going out to do some robberies to get some money to go to Missouri and kidnap her son. And we went to a Redlands mall. We like a mall, big supermarket. My stepsister worked in the deli department. We went and had a free lunch. We came out and sat on the car, my sister's car, waiting for her to get off work so we could go home to her boyfriend's house. And this girl drove up right next to us in a Honda Civic, blonde-headed lady, Karina Novus. She got out and went into the store. I told Cynthia, said, "That's a nice car." And I said, "Yeah, it's a Honda Civic. We should try to get it." So when the lady came out, I was wearing a suit, a brown suit, and Cynthia was wearing a blue dress. And she came out from the store and started getting her car, and I told her that our car was broke down. We needed a ride to the college. She said, "I'm going that way anyway. Come on." So we got in and went down the road, and I pulled a gun out and had her sit in my lap and handcuffed her behind her back. And Cynthia drove to a friend's house, and there we kept her there for a while, and we took a shower and we all had sex. She didn't want to. The lady didn't want to. We got her PIN number to her bank account. She didn't have any money. That's when we took her out and I strangled her. Then we went to her apartment, address of her apartment, and ransacked it and I think we got a typewriter and an answering machine, and we sold those for meth. I mean, we were out of our minds. We'd already been up for 7 days at that time.
Would you say anything to her if you
I
could?
was raised,
I mean, if you could say anything to that victim who's just an innocent person, what would you say to that person?
I would say, if you could torture me 1,000 times a day for 1,000 years, I would never be able to make up for what I took from you, and I'm very sorry.
So it sounds like your killing was all motivated by money and just trying to survive. Is that correct?
And drugs.
And drugs.
True. Drugs, mostly.
It sounds like drugs was the
Mostly
key.
Drugs, and to get enough money in a car to go back to Missouri to kidnap her son from her in-laws.
Marlo, where do you think this stems from your childhood that led to this?
I guess my upbringing, my relationship with my mom. Maybe I was mad at my mom and I took it out on Cynthia and these two women.
Do you think you use them as surrogates because of the breakdown with your mother?
That's what I get from psychotherapy. I believe it could be true.
Do you think that's where the possession of Cynthia came from as well? Just wanting to completely...
I think completely control and have someone stay with you no matter what and never leave you and have total control over them like I didn't have with my mom. I think I took it out on Cynthia.
Because your mom
wanted
was
her so much
constantly
to be-
going in and out of prison, so you felt abandoned?
Right.
Was there any time that you committed a murder where you weren't whacked out on drugs?
No. Well, in Kentucky, the guy I shot, Cynthia went down to his house to bring him up the hill. Told her car wouldn't start. He came up the hill and tried to start it, and I walked out from behind some trees about 20 feet away, and I started walking towards him, and I told him, what are you doing with my sister? And he said, I didn't know she was your sister. As I kept talking, I walked right up by him, and I grabbed a gun from his back pocket, and I put it up to his head and shot him. But I wasn't whacked out on drugs then.
How did you feel when you did that?
Exactly.
Yeah, I felt scared. I just wanted to get out of there and collect the money.
So you did that to get the money from him?
To get the money from someone who wanted him dead. $10,000.
Oh, so you were like a hitman.
Yeah. I told Cynthia only time that I wasn't whacked out on drugs.
Correct.
I told Cynthia through all the tortures I put her through, I said, if you take all this and you don't run away, you don't tell anybody, and you don't try to harm me when I least expect it, if you do, my Aryan warrior associates will kill your son and kill your family. And I told her that I had their addresses all phoned in, and I had people who knew about it, and said if she took all the punishments with a grain of salt and kept a stiff upper lip and endured it, she would be a captain in the Aryan sisterhood and be able to boss around other women later.
And what was her response to that?
Hers?
Yeah, Cynthia's. Did she have a choice? Did she have a choice in any of this?
Really,
Did she have a choice in any of this?
no. She had no choice.
Why? How did she not have a choice? Everybody has a choice. There's always a choice.
Well, I don't know about it. I don't know about that. The choice of having a knife shoved in your eye, having your eye poked out, or do something, what are you going to do?
That's what you were going to do to her if she betrayed you. Is that what you're saying?
Right. If she did anything I told her not to do, or she contacted anybody, or anybody in her past, I would gouge out her eyes, bite her nose off, kill her family.
Yeah. I want to back up to that one part where you talked about strangling the woman with the towel and then putting her in the tub. You said that Cynthia helped you with that.
Yeah. And honey,
Did she help you with that?
I forced her to help me with
Oh,
it.
you forced her to help.
She tried not to. She didn't want to pull on the towel. So I slapped her around and threw her around the room and told her I was going to pull her eye out of her head if she didn't pull it. And told her, remember her son, he's going to die if you don't pass these tests. So she pulled on the other end and I pulled on the other end.
At any time,
Yeah,
did
figure.
Cynthia beg you to stop? Was there any time where Cynthia was just like with these murders?
She was a drone. By that time, her mind was so decomputerized and broken down. She was like a drone. I could send her out for McDonald's and trust that she would be coming right back because I totally controlled her. I terrorized her like a terrorist and tortured her every day for 6 months. Starved her, fed her methamphetamine, had sex with her, passed her around, tortured her some more, beat her, stabbed her a few times, smothered her, choked her out.
But in the trial, you testified against her. And what year was that trial?
Right.
What year was that trial?
I think it was from 1987 to 1989.
And then at what point did you have
It kept
At what point did you have this vision, epiphany, where you decided that she was actually an innocent person? When did it click for you, and then when did you reach out to her attorneys?
Well, I always knew that. But later on, I kept remembering the stuff that the ex-Navy SEAL, Mr. Benson, sheriff's deputy in San Bernardino County Jail, kept thinking about the things he was telling me about God. And every time I had a chance to kill somebody, I let them go. It always made me feel better than it did when I killed somebody. I didn't feel paranoid or scared. I felt good about myself. So later on, it just wore on me. Year after year, the closer I would get to God, the more I would have this burden on my heart to try to help this person after 37 years.
And yet your attorneys advised
Nobody else.
Your attorneys advised you to say anything about that?
They advised me to say nothing about it.
Why do you think?
They don't care.
Oh, they don't care.
They don't want. They say that their job is to save me, not Cynthia. And that if I work with Laura or anybody else, they're only going to damage the case and make sure Cindy doesn't get out. But I can see that they're going to prolong this. I could have died 1,000 times already, and nobody would have known the story. And the closer I come each different time, I realize I don't know how much time I have. I need to get this story out, no matter what my lawyers say. They can hate me for it or think what they will, but I tried to get them to help me do it, and they said, we're here to save you, not Cynthia. So they
Why
want
did
to work
you-
on insanity plea.
Marlo, I want to ask, why did you come to me for help with this?
Why did I come to you? Because you were, because of Mark. talking
And Larry?
about you, and Larry, saying you might be able to help me if I wanted to help my girlfriend. I should talk to you.
Yeah, no, we're here. We're here. All right, so this is really interesting, James, that you've come to this conclusion here. What do you think could happen by you exposing that? I mean, because right now, I mean, up until now, the only persons that really knew about this was you and your attorneys, correct?
Right. My attorneys they actually think that I'm insane, and they want to save me and say I'm insane. When trying to tell them I'm not insane, I know what I'm talking about. I survived all this time without their help through all kinds of shit, politics with gang members and other people after me for 37 years. And not once or had to stab anybody else in all that time. God has saved me through miraculous experiences with overwhelming odds. Things have turned to my favor each different time, and it makes me realize, like it does the people that are after me, that if I was smart enough to elude the whole system for 37 years, then I was smart enough to get away with these crimes if that were what I was really into. But I was out of my mind. I was teaching Cynthia to be a killer. Part of me didn't want to do it. Part of me wanted to get caught. Part of me wanted to make her a killer. And I was like two people. I can't explain it. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Be right back.
Okay.
One time, when I was testifying that Cynthia wanted to kill her in-laws, I was lying on her. And she was crying one day since she couldn't get a picture of her son. They wouldn't send it to her. And I told her, I'd send my brother to get a picture for you, the ex-Marine. She said, okay. She sent me the address of where her son lived. And the cops got it, brought it to court, and said, if he's trying to kill your son, why are you showing him right where he lives?
Is this while you were in jail or prison?
Yeah, in jail.
Was it before you were convicted or after you were convicted?
During.
Oh,
Right, just before.
Just before. So you were on trial.
Right.
Okay. I want to go back a little bit. You're talking about your sanity, and your attorneys want to plead the insanity case for you. Laura, I want to ask you a question. You've spent time with James. Do you think he's insane?
No. And we just saw each other Saturday. We had a visit. We discussed, his case, and no, I don't think James is insane.
Now,
Well, do you think you're insane?
Do I think I'm insane? I'm on a spiritual journey to become the best person I can before I die, a self-actualized person. With all the psychotherapy and good doctors who really cared working with me over the years, months, weeks, and years, and the medications, and they have reconfigured my mind, and I have a guilty conscience for my codependent, and it's a burden for me to make this right. So I hope I can do it before I leave this world. She lost her life, but at least she can have a little bit.
Has the transfers off of death row, made this mission of yours more imperative, more dire, I guess, because of the transfers?
What about the transfers?
Has the transfers played a part in you wanting to come forward more, like get the word out?
No. I wrote to her lawyers. I wrote to the federal court. I wrote to lots of people. Nobody listened. Nobody cared. Nobody wanted to do anything about it. So I became desperate. The more another year would go by, I would think, man, there's another year that lady's in prison.
And I want to ask because, we've talked a lot about Cynthia. There's also the victims' families, too. What would you say to them?
Yeah. I would tell them the same thing. If they could torture me 1,000 times a day for 1,000 years, it wouldn't make up for what I took from them. I could never replace it. I could never even try to. All I could do is say, I'm guilty, I deserve death, and I'm sorry.
Have you ever tried reaching out to your victims' families?
I reached out to them, not the lady in Idaho, Kalina Novus. I never reached out to her family, but Linnell Murray's in Huntington Beach, I broke down and slobbered at the sentencing and told them I was very sorry that I took her now away from them and I couldn't make it up to them and I deserved death, so I pled guilty. And then Cynthia had me subpoenaed to her trial. In San Bernardino, they tried us jointly, but it made a circus out of the whole thing for an appeal. And in Orange County, they separated the cases and tried us separately. So I pled guilty to all charges in my case and went to her trial and pled the Fifth Amendment, and she got life without.
And that you just wanted to get back at her. Is that why?
At that time, I was trying to help her.
Is that why you pled the Fifth at her trial? Because you wanted to get back at her?
No, that's what my lawyers told me to do.
Got it. Which effectively doomed her when you did that.
No, I got her life without instead of the death penalty like she got in California, San Bernardino.
All right, so she didn't get the death penalty?
No, not in Orange County.
Not in
She got
Orange
life
County.
without.
Okay. But
she had an attorney that fought really hard for her and really cared about her.
Okay. But didn't she eventually get the death penalty?
She got it in San Bernardino before we went to Orange County.
Got it.
We both got death. She cried and said, but I haven't killed anybody. And the whole world was against me for going against her. The whole world wanted my ass. I had to deal with a lot of politics, a lot of official politics and a lot of prisoner politics. But God brought me through all that. I never had to kill one person, and I never got stabbed or anything all that time. And they say, man, you're a smart son of a bitch. How do you do it? And I told them I pray a lot. That's the only reason I could say, because I'm just as surprised as they are when certain little things happen all the time in my favor. I'm just as shocked as they are. And they think I'm some superhuman, badass, smart son of a bitch.
Laura, do you have something?
It's really wild, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Thinking about it.
Yeah. It's a hell of a story. I can't remember everything in one setting in 37 years, but there's a lot to it.
You remember a lot.
In Orange County, in San Bernardino County Jail for 3 years, they tried to kill me, and they never got to do it. And I used to have an officer in San Bernardino County Jail bringing me methamphetamine and having me sell it for him. And he would leave doors open for other prisoners to get at me. I couldn't talk him out of doing that. I couldn't scare him out of doing it. So I went to the court and I told him what he was doing. They said, we don't believe you, but we're going to check it out. So he ended up selling methamphetamine to an undercover internal affairs lieutenant and got put in the same jail as me, and it really pissed the cops off because they told him one of them. But I had no choice. I had to either kill him or tell on him. I didn't want to kill him. Yeah. In Orange County, they tried for 3 years down there to kill me. There were all kinds of scenarios and situations and setups and were unfruitful in their efforts. And they kept saying, you're the most aware human being we have ever met in our lives. I said, aware of what? He said, what goes on around you. I said, oh, I pray a lot. That's all I know.
Yeah.
Marlo,
I learned that God is really real. God is really real. He's not just a storybook.
When did you find God, Marlo?
I found a little person. I met him from the Navy SEAL guy, Benson.
Yeah.
And gradually, I would read other things and start to think more about it. And each time in a situation, I prayed to God, told him I would never kill another human being to get me out of all of that. I promise. And situations would happen where I had the opportunity to kill someone who was trying to kill me, and I always let them go, took the knife, gave it to the police, and I let them live. I told them, leave me alone. I come in peace. But every time you see somebody who comes in peace, they tear up half the town before they leave.
Do you still have any homicidal urges, Marlo, currently?
No way. No way. No way.
Let's talk about the electroshock therapy and all the drugs that they gave you. You definitely feel like that was beneficial for your case?
It helps me reach an understanding of more self-actualization. It helps me to think of my life and go back from the beginning and work through it, and then why this happened and what happened there and how I could have remorse.
Yeah.
You have to be vulnerable and have remorse to get to the truth of anything. And doctors can't help you if you're not honest with them. And if you're vulnerable and honest, they can help you immensely.
That's true. Do you know what any of your clinical diagnoses are, Marlo?
My first diagnosis was dual personality disorder, schizophrenia, persecutory syndrome.
You say schizoid?
Yeah, schizophrenic personality disorder, multiple personalities.
Multiple or dual?
Multiple.
Multiple, he said.
And dual, yeah.
How old are you now, James?
I am 67.
And how old were you when you went in to death row?
I was 30 years old. Cynthia was 24.
Wow.
She's 61 now. 24 years old.
Oh.
Marlo, what do you think could have prevented these crimes? Looking back now, in hindsight, what could have been done to have prevented this?
What could have prevented it? If I hadn't met Cynthia, I probably would have ended up doing it some other way. I don't know. What would have prevented it was to accept Jesus Christ in my life and live for Him would have prevented it. But I was like a dual personality. Part of me wanted to do it, and part of me didn't want to do it. Part of me wanted to turn myself in, and part of me wanted to kill. I was always fighting with this.
Did you have remorse immediately after you did it? Guilt after you did it?
I felt bad after I did it. I did feel bad. The more I started to come down off the speed, the more badder I felt. And I walked up to a cop car in Big Bear, California with swimming trunks on and boots. And she had a two-piece bathing suit in 30-degree weather. And I said who my name was. And they pulled out the gun and said, "This is bizarre." And I said, "I'm guilty and I can prove it."
Yeah. At what point did you start feeling remorse inside prison?
When I started coming down off the meth, we were hiding out from the cops in Big Bear.
Oh, yeah. All right. But when you were in prison, when did you start feeling that big, overwhelming, like when you found God? When you found God in the Navy, ex-Navy SEAL, is that when you started to realize that the weight of what you've done?
Not totally. It was after a lot of the experiences in San Quentin.
Okay.
Every time God would save me from a deadly situation, I would think of her and how what am I going to do to try to right that wrong, try to help her who I got. She's the biggest victim in this whole thing. She's lived 37 years behind bars.
Well, the biggest victims are the victims.
Yes, the biggest victim.
Marla. Yeah, the biggest victims are the victims.
Yeah.
But I don't discount her being a victim.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hers is a living torture. They suffered a little bit and died. It is the most horrible victim. But she's a victim too. I thought back then, if I couldn't have her, nobody could have her.
Well, I got a question for you. Now that you're a man of God and you believe in Jesus Christ and you pray, where do you think you're going when you're gone?
Well, the Bible says, "A broken and contrite heart I will not despise." And I read stories about David, how he murdered a man to have Bathsheba, and stories about a man named Manasseh who killed people for 50 years, and God forgave him and set him back on his throne as king. If God can forgive people in the Bible for all the horrible things they've done, then he can forgive me too, if I have a broken and contrite spirit and I'm really honest.
So you think you're going to make your way to heaven?
Heaven, earth, wherever God wants me is where I'm going to be. I just know I'm a repentant sinner. I was the most horrible sinner in the world in my book. But I'm a repentant sinner. I'm no longer the same person that I used to be. I think if God can forgive people who've done worse than I have, then he can forgive me too. I'll be with him.
Now, on death row there,
King David.
on death row, you've kind of been insulated from the general population of the prison. When they move you to another facility, you're going to be in Gen Pop, correct?
Right.
So how does that make you feel? And do you think, I mean, you've survived this long in prison. What do you think is going to happen to you on the main yard?
I'll be more politics, but I'm ready for it. I'm up for it. I'm ready to do it. I want to get a job and try to pay my own way. I'm going to give it a shot.
Okay.
See what happens.
Do you know where they're
God sent me this far.
Do you know where they're putting you?
Middle Creek or CMC.
So what is your plan for the rest of your prison life? What is, independent of just giving your life to God, what are you going to be doing with the remainder of your time?
Studying God's Word, writing to people. I have pen pals who love God, and I share with them my story and my life. And I get a job where I can pay my own way. The lawyers don't help me very much, but I have pen pals sometimes who help me. I just take it a day at a time.
I do have a question. When you do pass away and you reach the pearly gates, what do you want to hear God say to you? What would you want him to say to you?
I love you. I'm glad you accepted my son and my free sacrifice. And if you can accept that free gift and not shun from it, all those who call upon the name of the Lord will be saved. That's what the Bible says. I count on those verses. I just want to hear God say, I love you.
Do you regret what you did?
You know it.
Say that again, please.
That's why I told him you know it. That's why I told them all. I'm guilty and I can prove it. I told my attorneys that too.
Laura, do you have any other insight to share?
I was going to say, if you ever got the chance to talk to Cynthia again, what would you say to her?
Yeah, I'm more sorry than I could convey to you in human means. I can't make it up for you. It was 37 years of what I put you through. But believe me, it's been no picnic for me all this way. It's been a torturous trial by ordeal. And I'm standing here today trying to help you out as a miracle. Because staff and prisoners have worked together to try to kill me for 37 years. So they just got tired of trying and said, leave the guy alone.
Well, I was going to say, you said something earlier, how you always felt like you were at war with yourself, of wanting to kill and not wanting to kill. When did that start?
When I started doing meth. I was always a criminal, but I never killed anybody. My mom was a criminal, But she was more of a brawler. She wasn't a murderer. I started doing meth. I started really having a more intense dual personality of wanting to kill and not wanting to kill.
Do you think you had any underlying urges before the drugs?
Not that I know of. It was probably there. I probably took it out in different ways. I was abusive to my wives. I used to beat them. I've been married 4 times. I have 4 children.
Do you have relationships with any of your children?
I used to write, but as time went by, they just faded away. 4 sons.
And I don't know if you told us this earlier, but you talked about your mother, but where was your father? And do you know who your father is?
Yes, I do. He was an abusive alcoholic who lived in Ohio and worked at Fisher Body Auto Body, Fisher Auto Body, automobile. I stayed with him a little bit when I was 12 years old, and he beat me up all the time and ran away.
Got it.
Do you think the violence was a learned behavior from your father?
I think so. And my mother. She was fighting all the time. She stabbed my father in the stomach 7 times and left him in the street to die because he broke her nose.
James, we appreciate you coming on and telling us your story and letting us know how you feel about Cynthia and what your...
And the victims.
And how you...
Especially the victims.
Mm-hmm. Especially the victims, yes.
That's mostly why I pled guilty, because of the victims. I can't see trying to plead I'm innocent and try to get out of prison after what I've done. So I pled guilty and told them I'm guilty and I can prove it. That's for the victims. There's a lot of stuff I can't remember in one setting after 37 years. And then when I don't talk to you guys, I remember stuff and I think, man, I should have remembered that.
Yeah. You remembered a lot. You recalled a lot. You know, I mean, just based on the quick research we did on your case. I mean,
it's a miracle that I do after all I've been through with the psych meds and shock treatment. They used to take me to the outside hospital and shoot me full of drugs, and then I would go comatose. And they put electrodes on my head, my chest, and my leg. And they hit me with shock therapy and jolt me a few times. And then let me come out of it and bring me back to San Quentin. Did it a couple times a month, and then once a month for a year.
And is that something that you requested to be done, or your doctors inside the prison recommended it and you okayed it?
Well, they recommended it, but it had to be my choice. And they told me if I did it, they would take me off the clozapine. It was making me sleep 24 hours a day almost and drool out the side of my mouth on my pillow. I hated that. I told them, I'll do it. I'll give it a shot.
And for you, it worked.
They said, okay, it's your choice. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for anyone, young offenders out there or people going into crime that you would give to them?
If you just stay away from drugs and try to get a job and think before you do something wrong. Just take 10 seconds away and think, if I do this, what are the consequences? Or who's it going to hurt? So maybe in those 10 seconds you can change your mind and do something different.
So you think if it wasn't for the drugs, you wouldn't have committed those murders?
I think it has a play in it. I can't really say my state of mind was very stable before that. It wasn't. I was growing and growing more and more into a split personality. And if I hadn't met Cindy and the drugs, I probably would have done something else somewhere else.
All right, James.
Right,
we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you for your time and your honesty and your candor, Laura.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys. I hope you can help Cynthia.
We'll look into it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. God bless you guys.
Well, that was interesting, Laura. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. Was that the first time you met with him the other day?
It was my first time in person. Yeah. But I've spoken with him on the phone for years now.
Okay. And was this the first time he wanted to kind of reveal that information, saying that, or was he told you that before?
No, it was just this past year. He wanted to come out with it.
With the Cynthia information.
Yes. And then his attorneys got wind of it and were not happy.
Yeah. And you've tried reaching out to Cynthia, correct?
I have. I haven't gotten a response from her.
What facility is she in?
She is in, I'd have to look it up.
But she's just in for life right now, right? Or I
believe so. Or is she on death? Didn't he say she also got?
She got death row, but I don't know. I don't know where female death row is.
Yeah. Well, they have tablets on the female death row, and that's how I tried to reach out to her.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't got a response yet.
Well, maybe you can send. When we finish the podcast, this episode, you can, after it airs, you can send it to her.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll cajole her.
Yeah. I'm just surprised her attorneys haven't been jumping on this, or if he had tried to write them.
I think he has. I think he said why. I think he's probably pretty accurate in that assessment.
Well, yeah, true. But it's really sad.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, for me, it's the shock therapy is interesting.
Yeah.
The psychotropics, maybe there's a way to change or prevent people from committing these horrific crimes. I mean, these victims
I don't know many serial offenders who have had the electric shock therapy who have gone through it. So it's very interesting.
I would love to talk to one of his doctors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or at least a doctor who...
Or someone who does it if they can't be the person that...
Yeah. Do you think Dr. Alan Pass knows somebody that does that? He must.
I'm sure we could find somebody who specializes. Yeah.
But it sounded like, he was doomed from the start, from his family upbringing.
Yeah.
Not saying that, we all have, choices to make, but he didn't have the best environment.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of people who have come from worse and have not become killers.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely didn't help.
I mean, There was no reason. Those victims were just innocent people going to the ATM.
I know.
It's horrific what he did. Let's not forget that.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that there's redemption and that there has to be some kind of rehabilitation or some attempt at rehabilitation. But the reality is that he had a horrific childhood. He was exposed to drugs and horrific things at a young age. No one helped him.
Yeah.
It needs to start young. You can't wait until later.
No.
That's why they say it takes a village to raise a child.
And especially a young man.
Yeah.
Because they're naturally aggressive. We have that hormone testosterone that it's a double-edged sword.
Right. I mean, it could have been early intervention with his, once he started abusing his wives.
Yeah. Well, it didn't sound like he had any kind of positive role model at all. Nobody.
No.
Until the first positive role model he talked about was the officer in the San Bernardino jail who was the former Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
It seemed like that was like his awakening. He had a positive male role model that he found while locked up.
I bet that man doesn't even know.
Nope.
He was a positive role model on him.
Yeah, he's probably not even alive.
And the victims' families, how do they get past this, though? That's the thing. It's like... You can't.
No, there's no getting past it. It's, like I said, it's like a butterfly effect. It just lives on, kind of.
Well, that was a good get. It was interesting. And I think it'd be very interesting for people to hear that.
To have someone be so candid.
Yeah.
Like that. Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that was interesting about him is that he did have a little bit of remorse. You could hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he repeated the same thing over and over again.
And he was accepting responsibility for what he did, which is very unusual.
It is very unusual. So you do see the accountability.
And he did turn himself in that way?
No, they were caught with a credit card.
But when they eventually got caught, though, he basically says that he basically admitted to all of it. Is that accurate? He did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. That's one thing. You got to, he said he took responsibility for his actions.
Yeah, a lot don't.
No.
I mean, look at, we're sitting with Carpenter on death row.
Yeah.
Look at.
I know.
Oh, so many of them pretend they're innocent.
Sitting there for 40 years
and
still saying, I didn't do it.
Yeah, it's insanity.
Right. But only the good die young.
Yeah.
And if they were just honest and truthful and candid like he was, we could learn so much more.
Mm-hmm.
So much more.
Instead of the games, like even talking to Rob Dick about how many games he had to go through.
With Shermantine.
Shermantine. Yeah, if they could be more... But maybe the psychotropic therapy and the shock therapy helped James rewire a bit.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
All right, well,
let's played a big factor.
reach out to Dr. Alan Pass, see if he can find somebody. If not, we'll look for someone too. And then we should have them on because it's an interesting topic to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can follow it up with this one. Yeah.
Yep. All right, great.
Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and check out extra content from all of our podcasts. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content.